Hey, I'm Matteo from Anoma, and I just launched this watch.
And you're going to learn all about the A1 Slate in this video, as well as the story behind one of the hype micro brands of the moment.
What do you say, chaps? Should we get into it?
Let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Time+Tide. I would like to introduce you to the man with the hype brand of the moment, Mr. Matteo from Anoma. Matteo, how are you?
Very well, thank you for having me both.
And to Matteo's right, who just false handshaked
Just
Matteo,
missed that. There we go.
is Russell, UK editor of Time+Tide. We're going to have some fun today, people, because Anoma is a brand that is so new. It started yesterday.
Yeah.
And yet, somehow, this design is something of a household name in watches. We're going to explore that. How do you actually build a brand from nothing to something this substantial in a short amount of time? Share it with the people. How do you feel?
Good. I mean, it's exciting because we delivered our first series in January, which feels it was, a matter of weeks ago. And this is the first follow-up. So it's the first kind of second chapter of what we're trying to say. And it's been 6-7 months in the work.
There's been so much, I would say, positive press. You're on the cover of GQ Watch in this issue, which is crazy for a brand of your brevity.
Brevity is the right term.
I was going to say non-longevity, but there is a better word. But for a brand that's only months, not years old.
Yeah. Well, the thought process was really I think there's so much I want to say with this canvas of the A1, of this shape, of this form. And I liked the idea that there were all these kind of like very maximalist directions I could go in. And I thought it'd be quite powerful with the second chapter to do the opposite and almost go back to basics. Try to find like the purest version of the design, because the first one was already quite reductive. And I thought, what happens if I push that even further and try to create the most distilled, pure version of the A1 possible, really kind of pare it back. And I thought it was quite fun because I think we're in a world as well where there's stone dials, there's color everywhere, whether it's in watches or outside of watches. And it felt like quite a strong opposite statement to be like, no, we're going to go for something even more subdued, even more distilled, and I hope refined. With the A1, because it's the summary of so many different influences, I think about different variants in the future being an expression of the different sides of the personality. Yeah. And for me, this one is the one that says, if this watch is an exercise in constant reduction and really going to like the most essential version of something, I think this is probably the most exaggerated version of that.
Today is actually a special day. Today is the 5th anniversary of the day you first reached out to me over email.
Is it really?
No way, to the day.
To the day, 6th of March, 2020. You reached out to me over email about a possible job where you and I worked together for 2-3 years at a Collected Man. And in that job, we got to handle some of the most extraordinary watches in the world. You know, we're talking all the way up to what was at the time the most expensive independent watch ever sold, that Philippe Dufour. But you've transitioned now from handling these £1 million watches to developing what is arguably a very accessibly priced model.
I think what was fun at a Collected Man is I think I got hands-on with so many watches that you start to develop a sense of how something should weigh, what the proportions are, even how something evolves over time. There's certain watches that you get, you instantly understand them, and then you get bored of them a little bit. There's other watches that kind of grow on you with time, you fall in love with them, you fall out of love with them. They kind of like in the environment adapt.
Yeah.
And I think also because we work so closely with so many independent watchmakers, right? Whether it's Florian Gael at Petit Bidal or Rex Shepard at Crivier. I think what I really liked was with independence, really, it's a desire you become independent because you have something very strong that you want to say. And you have a worldview and you have a message that you want to communicate.
And so how do you feel and what do you say when we release the first A1 and you instantly get comments that are comparing you to this?
There it is. There it is.
So the Hamilton Ventura was possibly sort of the number one word in your comment section.
Yeah.
When this first came out. What was your reaction? How did it make you feel? What was your first thought when you were seeing those comments? Were you expecting them?
I wasn't expecting them, though I think I probably was expecting them in the sense that if you look at the Ventura, it's the only other majorly known triangular watch.
Yeah.
But to be honest, if you look at them side by side, I think the comparison is as similar as saying a Philippe Dufour Simplicity and let's say a Longines Conquest are similar because they're both round in a classic language.
Which one's the Dufour?
The Dufour, I think I won't comment on that. I think we'll look at the collector base for either of them.
We'll let them decide.
But if you look at them, even having them here, they're drawn on a triangular form.
Yeah.
But the Ventura is very angular, very kind of like case falls down. It has these extending kind of like lugs that take over. And then if you look at the Anoma, yes, it's triangular in form, but you've got a triangle within a triangle. So you've got that kind of movement. It's much more about kind of like soft curves and rounded corners that the Ventura is. And I think with me, my process was when I started designing this, looking at kind of inspiration outside of watchmaking for this shape, I was conscious there were other triangular-like watches
Of course.
that people would compare you to. And so I tried to not look at those in the sense of, let me take a bit from this or a bit from that. But I was always conscious that people would compare. And so I thought I need to create something that is distinctive enough, that stands on its own merits, that has its own identity, that comparison almost becomes not futile, but it has its own right to exist. But people will always make comparisons the same way they make comparisons with everything, right? That's just the way the internet works.
That's the nature of the game.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of what people say, today is a day where you'll be flooded with yet more feedback and yet more comments. However, I want to draw attention to the comments from the people that received this watch. Tell me about some of the comments that have really cut through to you, because you are posting these elegiac, poetic, incredibly heartfelt messages to you from people that receive it. Why are they loving it?
If you look at the watch, it's incredibly simple, right? It's an act of like very reduced design. It's almost like a monoblock case, one finishing. So it's not necessarily the thing that you look in pictures and see flourishes in every corner, details. And that's why in images, it's striking, but you don't get all the kind of like subtle little details. And with this, I'd say it took almost as much work to get from 0% to 80% as it did from 80 to 100. And that 80 to 100% was all about the small details, the way the mid case and the bezel come together, the way the hands curve to be at the same curvature as the case, etc. And those are all small things that you can only, I think, really appreciate once you own it and once you hold it. And so what I think was wonderful when people received them is you kind of get the watch, you bought it in many cases sight unseen. So you've taken, I think, a leap of faith, and people received it. And some people are like, wow, I really didn't expect this. To which my question was like, well, why did you buy it in the first place?
Hype, baby, hype.
But I think it's nice the kind of obsession to the very small things that you've put into something is something that people pick up on.
When you write a letter, you hope that every single intention of that letter is received by the recipient.
Yeah.
What are some details that you put into this watch that you hoped people would notice, but suspected they probably wouldn't? What have you been surprised about a tiny detail that you did that has come back to you in spades?
I'd say two elements. The first one is the way I work on my dials is actually, I kind of layer different finishings. On the first one, brushed and then polished, and on the second one, brushed, then engraved. And then I put in different shades of lacquer. What that tends to mean is if you hold the watch, you don't instantly understand it. Whereas if I didn't put the lacquer, it would instantly come at you. You'd see the engraving. It'd be very rich.
Reveals all.
And that was a conscious choice to actually hide a lot of what I'm doing. And my suppliers, because of the fail rate on lacquer, because you basically fail 50% of your dials, were like, if we don't put lacquer, it'll be more obvious and half the price. And I was like, that's not the point. The point is to create something where you might wear it in this light, then you might wear it outside, then you might wear it under a neon, and you will catch these very different glimpses. And I think people have been very attuned to that in a way that I maybe had the fear of like, is this too subtle? Am I going too far down the route of like...
Meanwhile,
really
my
small
Instagram
details?
post had one part under artificial light.
Yeah.
And I was trying to catch the way the dial has a little trick up its sleeve. I won't tell you what it is because you can maybe find it yourself. But in artificial light, I'm trying to make it do the trick, didn't do the trick.
Yeah.
And then in the sun, I'm like, Russ, I found the spot where it does the trick. And again, I'm wearing an animated Cartier dial right now because I love dials that play for me, that work for me, that animate. And that is something that, whereas and no doubt they might put it on inside in artificial light and think they know the watch. So there's a lot of detail here, and I think the dial is one place where it really comes to light. We've got an opportunity now to do FAQs from the feedback today, answer all the questions. You've no doubt had one particular question a few times, why the change in price, but what other things, give me 2 or 3 things that people are asking that we can address right now.
I think the first one is people trying to understand the evolution in the dial and the choice behind that, and why I chose to change it and what the changes are. And I think, as I mentioned previously, I think with the first one, I was so conscious as I moved on to the second one to, as I mentioned earlier, create like the purest version of the design possible. But I wanted to bring this layer of like complexity, but that reveals itself over time. And so people look at the dial, and I think, as you said, like you'll see the two-toneness, but then you might not see like the engraved details. And in a certain light, you might see the engraved details. And so I think a lot of the questions have been around those changes and what drove them. And I think it was really that desire to refine and take elements from the first series and kind of carry them through. But broadly, to us, most of the questions have been, when can I get one and how quickly will they arrive?
And what's the answer to that?
The answer will be, so we'll open orders on the 10th of March, so on Monday. We just wanted to give a window so people can get used to the watch, order it, so there's not like a rush as soon as it goes live. Sure. And then we'll deliver the first batch in June.
June, excellent. And to answer the question on price, why has it gone up?
Yeah.
So why was this one so low?
So the first one was 1,300, and then we've gone up to 1,800. And that's a mix of three things really. The first one is we priced the first one lower as a way to thank and essentially incentivize early supporters. People who were basically, I'm happy to give this stranger my credit card details and wait 7 months.
With no track record.
With no track record at all. Just a nice Instagram feed, and that was a way to thank them. And then as we move on to the Slate, we're just balancing the price up to somewhere where we can keep the business kind of running on a more sustainable basis, invest in future projects. And we've also made a few little refinements to the case and the dial. So on the case, for example, on the first series, it was already CNC, kind of molded and CNC cut for precision. But we've refined it even further on the second one in such a way that, for example, every case is 3 parts, but it's cut from one block of steel. The bezel, mid-case, and case back are matched. And then we basically combine them to get like just that extra level of like precision and sharpness. And then because of the dial, we actually have a 75% fail rate on the second series dials, as I said, because 50% of them fail at engraving, 50% of them fail at lacquering. So a combination of that, really, thanking the early supporters, moving on to a more sustainable level, and some little tweaks to the design itself.
Beautiful. Now, I do have news on that front too. We are super proud to announce that we will be stocking this ongoing as a production piece. And that's a big step for you, because we've gone from many brands in your position do multiple short runs before they get to production. But we together, I think, discussed this, and reading the room for a watch like this that has such a strong signature, the idea to move straight into a production piece, I think is really great. I love that.
I think that was part of the intent as well of, it'll be production in the sense that we will keep it in the catalog. It'll still be like in runs because there's obviously limitations over how many we can make. But I thought it felt, with something like this, I think the way to ruin like a good momentum is you make 10 different batches of limited editions that go in all sorts of different directions.
Yes.
And you lose what is hopefully an exercise in restraint, right? So it starts as very restrained, goes in all sorts of different directions.
And you lose the potency of that original idea, I think,
yeah.
if it gets diluted too much with variations.
And so I like the idea of saying, you know what, this is a variant, the most classic one, the archetypal one, which we stand by.
It's no longer a clean YouTube video. Damn it, monetized, gone. This on the wrist. God, look at this thing. I've just been glimpsing it out of the corner of my eye. Russell, you told me a little secret about Matteo, and that he's had a not entry-level collection over the years. Choose a watch from your past that you hope this can be in the future.
So
you are outed, my friend.
I was lucky enough to own for a brief period of time a Cartier Santre from the 90s. So this was the CPCP collection. So it was at the time, the thinnest Santre they'd ever done. Exploded Arab numerals based on, I believe, the Fred Astaire version. And for me, that's a watch that is powerful because it's incredibly reductive. The way it hugs the body, I think sensuality is the only word for it. It becomes part of you and the way you wear it. And it's almost 100 years old, and it still has that power. And I think that watch is an example of, you don't need much if it's done well to create something very powerful. And for example, the word of sensuality I think is interesting because the word sensuality doesn't really come up in watchmaking very much. It's not something we think about. But even the way I was thinking about the A1, the way it sits on the wrist, the way it interacts with the bone, the curves, I think we wear these things so much and we don't necessarily always think about how we wear them, how they weld with the body. So yeah, I guess if I should compare myself to one of the great icons that I'd aspire to be.
That was my hope in the question. To me, there is a sensuality in this in the same way that there's sensuality in Mark Newson's work, which is that biomorphism, which is that sense of an organic form.
Yeah.
Which, again, a lot of words, but I've just been glimpsing this beautiful, shiny, and reflective object that seems to just be constantly playing with the light out of the corner of my eye. And when you're wearing yours, it'll do the same thing. Let's talk, there's a last question about the constraints of 2 watches now that have a triangular form.
Yeah.
And what can you tell people about Anoma that's going to excite them for the future?
Yeah. So
More triangles or?
It's actually a rounded, shiny pebble. It's not a triangle.
Sorry. Yes, rounded forms, they're everywhere.
Exactly. So I think my goal really is to have a few core foundational sculptures or forms that I then take in different directions. So I think the A1, because it has many different influences and facets of its personality, I will explore other directions that will be more than just a dial color change, which I think ultimately would be the way to ruin this if I, for the next 5 years, just did different kind of color variants. So I will go into different parts of the identity. And then in parallel, I've already started developing an entirely second model. But this took almost 2 years to kind of develop. And the second one I'm thinking about is arguably more complex. So I'm starting my work on it, but I'm almost not in a rush in the sense that the day I launched this, the day after, the question was already, what next?
Yeah.
What's the next shape?
Yeah.
And so you will always have that. And my thing is I'm developing that in parallel. It will take the time it takes. And when it's ready, it will get out there. But I definitely don't want to just rest on this. If anything, the issue is I have too many ideas, and watchmaking being what it is, things take time.
I am privileged to have had a little glimpse of what might be coming.
Yeah.
I hope you do what I suggested. We are going to find out about that. And look, Anoma, a brand that is so new and such a green shoot of life and of vitality in this, I think, fantastic new wave of creativity. Matteo, it is super exciting tonight to be doing a major event with you. But for you watching right now, key takeaways are this watch is a production piece. Don't be titillated and tantalized and angry about the fact that it's probably going to be already gone by the time you're watching this video. It will still be available. Yeah. Thank you, Matteo. And watch this space, pardon the pun.
Guess so. Exciting things to come, I hope.
Indeed. Thanks for watching Time+Tide, and thank you, Matteo, for joining us. Look up Anoma on Instagram, follow the man. It's a beautiful account, and follow us.